Hi all, welcome to the third episode of the podcast Bitcoin as a Store of Value. And welcome here, Jeff Booth. Jeff, it's really great to have the chance to speak with you. When I discuss with normal people interested in Bitcoin, your book is one of the top 5 recommendations, together with the Bitcoin Standard, Breedlove, and Sailor series of money, Internet of Money on Tonopoulos, and the Internet of Money on Topoulos, and Broken Money from Lynn Alden. So great to have the chance to speak with you. How are you doing?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Hello, Jeff.
Hi, Francesco. It will be also the other host, and we will be making a question and discussing about the economic system. So I think we can start saying one of the biggest obstacles for people to understand Bitcoin, I think, is that it's very hard to understand that our economic system, monetary system, is flawed, so it's broken. And with this, it always take a lot of time in order to explain. We cannot really explain in the deep in short time, but we can give the people a heads up or making them curious about to deep dive further. And for example, the book from Jeff is a great to deep dive why we should have live in a deflationary economy. So Jeff, it would be great if we can start to define to answer one of the biggest questions, the most important question: what is money, and which are the properties that define something, an asset, to be a good money?
Well, I think, Alex, if you don't mind, we should start somewhere else, because I think that's what we could talk about. Is money information? What is it? All of these things. But I think when you start with a different place, when you start just with how we experience things, we use things that give us more value. Like, can you imagine if Google or this Twitter Spaces charged us $5 a minute, or Google charges $5 a click? We wouldn't use it anymore. So you can see that everything you do in your life, you're trying to get more value. And the free market and the entrepreneurs try to create more value for you. And if they don't create more value for you, they go broke. So the output of those things, the output of our actions trying to gain more value in a free market, has to be deflationary. So it's just the natural state of a free market is deflation. And then we invent things to be able to create more value on top of that. That things we invent become technologies. We name technologies or AI or anything else to give more value. And as that moves faster, that must mean faster deflation. And so that's the world we should live in a free market. So it poses the question, and everybody I would ever talk to knows that. They nod their heads, perfect, and yep, that makes sense. Totally makes sense. That's what I do. And every economist will tell you that prices follow to the marginal cost of production. So they all know that. So we nod our heads, and we don't understand the implications of measuring from the other system. So the implications of just, okay, that makes sense, and then measuring from the other system means we don't live in a free market. We live in a control system disguised as a free market. And I understand the reasons why people get caught. I understand very well why the reasons people get caught, because we've never seen anything like Bitcoin that could prevent us from living in a control system eventually.
Thanks. Yes, we can start by that definitely. Yes, it's now for people who have studied Bitcoin and studied economy, it's quite clear that we should live in a deflationary economy. But also, as you said in other interviews, we have empathy for people who are trapped in the normal system, in the standard system they were living. That actually is not the normality. It's the normality is in 1971. It's against what was money for thousands of years. But people, when we talk about we should live in a deflationary economy, the first comment is, okay, without inflation, we cannot stimulate the economy. Everyone will hoard, everyone will save, and we will have a recession. It would be great if we can elaborate on what we should answer when we have this question.
Yeah, and Alex, I'm going to go way further back than 1971, because 1971 wasn't what you think. It was one of the steps in towards the end of a line of a currency, but it wasn't. If you go through the entire history of humans, we have always lived in somewhat. You could say this: if you could convince others that inflation was required, then that would mean that you could steal the productivity of other humans and do nothing. So the prices the productivity that should flow to them in the form of lower prices, you could skim off a little bit, and they wouldn't know. So you could steal from them slowly. And so if you could convince other humans to be able to live in that system, of course you would. And we see throughout time, even on gold, that because gold got centralized, that always happened. And then we'd go to war throughout history to reset the currency. And then the new winner of the war would say, promise not to do it again. And then it would start again. And so our entire human history is filled with exactly the same thing. And how do you get elected in that? You get elected by convincing your citizens that the other people are bad people. You divide your citizens, and then how you stay elected in that is you create a greater enemy outside of your borders. Through that lens, World War I hasn't ended. It just got kicked down they kicked the can down the road. They created gold and the US dollar to be able to extend that empire in World War after World War II in Bretton Woods. In 1971, they were able to find a new trick. Instead of gold, tie it to energy, and where we are now. And so that productivity that's stolen from the world, from 8 billion people, accrues to many people in the U.S. right now. That's what and fiat currencies and anyone tied to the U.S. System, so Euro, Canada, but it's always been the same. And why currencies failed more slowly over the course of history is deflation wasn't as fast. Technology wasn't moving as fast. Now you're moving into a different cycle, and technology is moving faster and faster, meaning the theft from the currencies has to move faster in the opposite direction. Otherwise, the credit-based system would collapse. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Francesco, you want to comment?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I thought about, and it's my first question. Do you think that in this scenario, the relationship between Bitcoin and the technological advancements go to add more deflationary and intrinsic value power to the Bitcoin as an asset? And also, given that we have named this space store of value because we want to stress what is currently in the Western world now, Bitcoin, and to make easier for people to learn about it by thinking it's a digital gold. Is holding Bitcoin, in your opinion, using Bitcoin? And also, does it have a space and a technological power and the layer which is a bit overlooked at the moment, and is still part of the value of Bitcoin? That's a question.
So So here's where I start this, and I say, okay, so if no one in history has ever seen something like Bitcoin, so we don't have any prior to it. So all of our history books would be filled with how economics had to work, how and the winners write the history books. You could expect a flaw in our knowledge, all of our priors coming into Bitcoin. So if it was truly something decentralized and secure that was outside of the existing system, then it would be really hard to understand because people would be measuring it from their existing bias and they would be trying to attach their prior knowledge to Bitcoin. And so I understand why this is really hard to get, because that's what's happening. And it's actually happening to a lot of Bitcoiners as well. But here's how I look at this. I look at this as we know in first principles, we've already discussed, the free market is naturally the natural state of the free market is deflation. We know in first principles that we have exponentially increasing technology, meaning that should be exponentially increasing deflation. As a derivative from those two statements, we know that the existing credit-based system has to steal more, because if you allowed deflation from that credit-based system, it would all collapse to zero. So it has to constantly expand money supply to steal more at an exponential rate. And most people are measuring inflation from zero, and they're mismeasuring the true rate of inflation in money supply. So they're measuring CPI. But what they should be measuring inflation from is the implied deflation rate. And so what that means is all of the currencies are stealing way more from you than you know. And so we know all of those things are true. What would it look like from Bitcoin's perspective rather than the existing currency's perspective? And so and I often say, if it stays decentralized and secure, it will reprice everything in the world. And that's a guarantee. It'll reprice everything if it stays decentralized and secure. And why I say if is so people do their own work to understand why it will. And we can get into that if you want. But I believe it will stay decentralized and secure. And it gets more decentralized and secure every year. So if it's going to reprice everything over time, what would that system be measuring? And so for anyone listening to this, go pull up a Bitcoin price in your local currency. Let's say pull it up in the US and then hit the max and say, what has it done? And then just, instead of US currency, just insert pieces of paper pricing things in the US. And you'll see whatever it is today. And then take that same thing and pull it up in Turkey and pull it up in Argentina, and you'll see a wholly different number of pieces of paper pricing things in those countries. And in the US, it might be 62,000 pieces of paper. In Argentina, it might be 55 million pieces of paper for the same thing. And ask yourself, does the piece of paper price the world, or does Bitcoin price the world? And it's really easy to see that all things measured in Bitcoin are falling forever, no matter what currency. And as a derivative of that, you can say, so when people are taking Bitcoin price thinking it's going up to their currency to measure it, it's a mismeasure of what's happening. But if you measure things in Bitcoin, all things are falling to the marginal cost of production and will forever, because it's the only free market choice. And as more people start to understand that, more people move into it, protecting their value and expanding it further.
Thanks, Jeff. You touch very many points on why it's so hard to understand Bitcoin. I agree with many of your points. Like first, it's a new thing. And also Andreas Antonopoulos always explain when it is a new thing was with the internet, with electricity, with the gas, with the telephone. It's always hard to understand new technology at the beginning. Also Satoshi Nakamoto in one of his email, he was saying it is hard, bloody hard to explain Bitcoin. And second, because people, as you said, people are thinking to move from our actual economic system to the Bitcoin monetary system, or let's say sound money system. And obviously there will be many concerns because then people ask, okay, but we have a big debt. If we have a deflationary system, we should the debt will become more and more significant. The solution is not that we should not have the debt at all. The transition maybe will be painful, but we should think as a first principle, as you said, from a different monetary system, not at the transition between the current and the Bitcoin monetary system. What do you think?
Yeah, what most people don't realize is the debt is a function of it has to grow faster. It's because the technology is moving the other way and trying to give you more value. And if you lived in that system, every person on this planet gets richer every day or every year by the implied deflation rate. And that's actually what people are feeling when they're holding Bitcoin. That's what's happening. But let's use some real numbers right now. So if what I said is true, and if it stays decentralized, then the implied value of Bitcoin today is $900 trillion. That's the assets of the world today. And you could ask yourself inside there, how much do you own of 900 trillion? That's the ledger today. And then you could ask, how much do I own of Bitcoin? The ledger that's repricing that 900 trillion. And so you could just do a division of 900 trillion divided by, pick your denominator. If you want to use 21 million, or if you want to use how many coins might be lost, you could use a smaller number. But that's about $46 million implied Bitcoin value today. But remember, I don't talk about it priced in fiat. So most people say, oh, Jeff thinks it's going to go to $46 million. It's irrelevant to me. But that's the implied value, the purchasing power over time of the Bitcoin today. By the time we get 5 years down the road, the existing system you're measuring from, the existing ledger you're measuring from, will not be 900 trillion. It can't be 900 trillion, because if it was 900 trillion, you would have a deflationary collapse and it would completely fail. Every bank would fail. So the number it is probably closer to in 5 years is 2 quadrillion. So at that time, all prices of everything else will feel like double or more, because people are measuring through those distorted currencies. And the implied value of that time of Bitcoin would be 92 million. On the other side of the thing that's happening at the same time is the 46 million, if you said today, the implied value, everything is falling against that in the free market. So technology is moving faster and faster. And that means that purchasing power of the 46 million today is more and more valuable every year. That's the world we're moving to right now. And the people that are measuring from Bitcoin are already just living there. That's when people talk about how positive it is and how it's changed their life and how they're meeting people and they see people that are really positive on life instead of nihilistic. That's what they're feeling. It's just, and I would say one of the things I find fascinating is people saying, when will it happen? Well, it's happening, because and the only thing, it doesn't care what we think about it. It doesn't care if the US wants to print 30% more money tomorrow. It will still reprice everything. It doesn't care if what any government says, it will still reprice everything. So the only thing is, do you care? Do you spend more of your time and energy in it? And as you spend more of your time and energy into it, your life gets better. And you want to share it with other people so their lives get better.
Yes, I agree. But also believe many people are a bit lazy and they don't want to do the work because it's too risky, and to take a responsibility over their destiny is something many people don't like to do, and that we have to face it. But to this regards, I also was thinking. We have the first examples of nation state adoption, like El Salvador. And so let's say government starts to back their national currency with some Bitcoin, and then some other will follow, and then like in theory scenario. But how do you think people, the population, are going to perceive that? Because if value is subjective, then how they are going to perceive it will change everything. And do you think it's going to be immune from manipulation of information, or if that can prefer to actually hold the Bitcoin, to use a Bitcoin, to spend the Bitcoin, because they will see their society improving, and if aside El Salvador, some other nation state starts to do that. Is that a viable route, or we should also go towards a war or something very bad to change the system from Keynesian to Austrian one? Or is it possible, in your opinion, a gradual transition where the newly perceived value can drive, from the population side, can drive more adoption of Bitcoin? Is it a scenario possible?
Yeah, so just say all scenarios are possible as this reprices the world. And I would say many of those scenarios are probable. Expanding war from the existing system, it has to capture your attention. It has to try to stop this. All of these things will happen. But remember, it's not a nation state, it's you. It's every single individual. This is a permissionless, open, decentralized, and secure protocol. Bounded by energy and creating more energy abundance by its very nature. What I just said there is that it's a protocol and not a technology is really critical. It's tethered to energy and it's a new protocol. And the world is being rebuilt on top of this protocol that heals the world. And you don't have to wait for your country or company or anyone to give you permission to spend your time on this protocol. And so as more and more people understand that, they're not going back. They're never going back to the former way of we've constructed societies. They're moving to this, which imposes discipline on governments. Instead of governments preying on you or controlling you, they have to be in service of you. Some will not. Some will fight that. And then it'll give an advantage to others that don't fight that want to want free and open markets. Because free and open markets have always been more successful than closed markets. We were not meant to live in cages. Those free and open markets and the attraction of capital and talent to those markets will accelerate, which will then impose more pain on societies trying to close in their citizens. And those citizens will eventually overthrow those governments who are preying on them because there's more citizens. And they will impose more and more open and free markets. Now, this is going to be a messy transition. But anyone inside Bitcoin holding self-custody, and not like if you held your Bitcoin it's on an exchange or something, it's not your Bitcoin. It will likely be captured at some point. But if you're holding in self-custody, then you are part of the network that's expanding that, and more countries or states within countries will want you and your talents and be competing for you. That's what's going to happen.
Thanks, Jeff. One question also again on the transition. Now that with a standard economic system, with the Keynes economic system, we have inflated so much with the currency. So according to the Austrian business economic cycle, after the bubble, will be the burst. So once we move in the transition, at one point there should be, I believe there should be the burst, because every time we increase the supply of money, we are having maybe short-term benefit because people get some money, but long-term will be always harmful, and the harmful is much more than the short-term benefit. So do you foresee at one point there will be also a reset to have the previous costs or previous prices, let's say?
Those resets typically happen in war. And if you have to think about how strong the network effect of the US dollar is today and how strong it is in other countries. So today, and why this is a longer way out than people think, is and why it's going to transition messy and bumpy, is the US dollar gets stronger as they export inflation around the world and other currencies get weaker. And then we buy from those, then we extract resources and materials from those other countries, and they think they're winning again, and then they reset their currency again and again and again. And then they use tether to be able to peg to the US dollar because they think it's safer than their currency. They're right, it's safer than their currency, but they don't know that they're actually making the whole system stronger by their actions, and effectively, which looks like modern day slavery. So if you look at Bitcoin price in Argentina or Turkey or Egypt or any of these nations, and you can see what I'm saying. And that means we're like all of the raw materials, all the labor, we're extracting it, and the US dollar gets stronger as a result. So this game can be played for much longer than people think. It's still modern day slavery for most of the population through a financial system, but because they don't see it, they give it more strength.
So this will be one of the reasons why it will take longer, because and also I think another reason why in the West world it's harder to understand for people is because both in European Union and in US, we have not experienced big inflation in the very high inflation in the last from the Second World War. I think we had.
But actually, just use that example what you just said and use it to how fast EVs are growing and batteries. And 70% of the batteries come from the cobalt for the batteries comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. In any normal market, that means Democratic Republic of Congo should be rich. Their citizens should be rich. If the major thing needed for one of the biggest growth areas was coming from your country, you think you'd be rich. But instead, the currency has to be devalued over and over and over, so that we can extract the cobalt way cheaper to keep our inflation down. It's a crime, but it's a crime delivered through a monetary system, and most of the planet has no idea that they're living in that crime. And then those same people decide, I need to get on a boat to protect and then you elect dictators to lock in the crime. And they become part of the enterprise. And then a whole bunch of people try to get on boats to save their lives and save their families' lives and come to countries that are on top of the crime, so that they can live in the free market, which is not a free market at all. It's imposing this on the rest of the world.
Yes, all of this will not happen if we had a decentralized monetary system.
It's also interesting to try to figure it out. What's the inflation point? If it can exist, because you said just say everything is possible. Bitcoin, looking at Venezuela, but unfortunately, all of the examples we have worldwide of the national currency being ditched for the US dollar come from countries in deep crisis. So a gradual transition where people abandon the incumbent currency is yet to be seen. Knowing human nature and the system of incentives, I think not only, as you said, is going to take place over a long time period, but also very difficult to actually take place. And do you think is there any other factor which might lead, aside of a catastrophic scenario, people to realize and lose faith in their own currency in favor of Bitcoin?
Well, if you look at flows right now, there are higher flows to Bitcoin in currencies that are failing. The question is, do they hold in Bitcoin? Do they understand what's going on? But you can already see that this is a store of value asset against currency devaluation all around the world. And we know for sure, because it's just math, that currency devaluation all around the world has to accelerate. And this is creating waves of new Bitcoiners, and some of them are at level 1 or 0 on understanding Bitcoin, and some of them move to level 10 on understanding Bitcoin. And kind of as you go down that rabbit hole to higher levels, you'll never go back. So Bitcoin is being strengthened at all times by more people waking up. And as it spreads around the world, more and more people will wake up, and they'll have curiosity, and they'll understand what we're saying is happening, and it'll make it stronger. And so that entire strength of it is the repricing of everything in Bitcoin terms. That's what's happening. And it's not like anytime somebody says those people, I kind of wonder, who are those people? Because I was one of those people who didn't understand Bitcoin 8 years ago. And now I'm not one of those people. And so we all take the same path. This is such a new, this is so new that you have to look outside the lens that you're looking at, and that's hard for people to do. So this communication, what you're doing on this Spaces, many of the different podcasts, all of the different people around the world fighting for this system, adding their voices, their time, their energy into a system based on truth, are bringing on more people to that system based on truth, and that's what changes the world, all of us.
In fact, a great sentence among Bitcoiners is, it is impossible to unlearn Bitcoin. Once you have learned, and then you don't go back. So that's also why in the cycles, the price in fiat money generally goes up in the long term, because there is a new wave of Bitcoiners forged during the cycle. So
yeah, I guess the question here is how does Bitcoin shows its value to the people? Because given that is a quasi perfect combination of energy and time, which follows the natural laws, maybe it's really needed a small taste of it, a small bit of it, for people for the network effect to grow and to expand at a very fast page. Maybe this is the secret why you say people are ditching their weak currency for Bitcoin instead of the US dollar. And the perfection unveils itself. This could be an answer.
Yeah, well, there's probably a whole bunch of people in Bitcoin that think about it priced in their local currency, and then when it gets to a certain point, they're going to sell it, right? And maybe that's level 2 in Bitcoin, 3 in Bitcoin. So there's a bunch of those people going further down the rabbit hole to understand, wait, it's repricing everything forever. And as you start to understand that your time matters, and the more time you spend in this system based on truth, the richer your life is. You start to do more things in this. And so you go to level 5, 6, 7, you start to understand this. And that's that one-way check valve. As you start to get deeper, now there's also some people that would be measuring this in fiat, and then we'll sell it. And those people might do well for a while, measured in fiat, but they'll then later on come back to Bitcoin and hold it for the very same reasons. So this, and why it doesn't, again, Bitcoin doesn't care that I'm here. It doesn't care what I think of it. It's imposing a free market discipline around the world. And what that does is it enriches 8 billion people around the world instead of 500 million at the expense of 7.5 billion. And it's going to just keep doing that. The only choice for each of us is, which system are we giving our energy to? And if we're giving more of our energy to the system that's stealing from us, we should ask ourselves, why?
Yeah, so on this point, do you agree with Michael Saylor that Bitcoin has a transformation, a flow of energy, and some zero game, which is where the value is being created as well? Meaning that he said that there's a transformation of electrical energy into monetary energy. Because some people don't agree with him, but I don't know if you do.
So again, each of us has a different view, or slightly different, and that's okay. I think about this: a permissionless, open, decentralized, and secure protocol bounded by energy, tethered to energy, that creates energy abundance by its very nature. So now you have a bedrock of the new world, a new peer-to-peer internet that's tethered to energy. And because it's tethered to energy and everything that can now be built on top of that, I'm trying to explain what I just explained to people, that because we see, just if you think through history, you see technologies more often than you see protocols. You see way more, and then you see way more companies than you see technologies. So it just would look like a pyramid or a reverse pyramid, and very rarely do you see protocols. The internet being a protocol that changes everything, and protocols come along in layers. And they come around very rarely and then methodically in layers, because the first layer of the protocol has to harden and harden and harden and harden and do one narrow thing before anything else is built on top of it. So if you looked at that protocol, that open, permissionless, decentralized, and secure protocol tied to energy that I explained, that's what Bitcoin is. And it sacrificed scale to do so. Its scalability to do so. It did one narrow thing: decentralized and secure. And because it did that, and it's getting stronger, more decentralized, more secure every year, now it can add capability on top of it through Lightning, through then Fediment, through a bunch of other things. And also, because we see technologies more often than we see protocols, a whole bunch of people would use the idea of Bitcoin, and they would say, I have another blockchain, another technology. I have another cryptocurrency, another technology, without understanding how protocols come. And then there'd be a whole bunch of people holding Bitcoin on the protocol, and they would want to change Bitcoin to be able to do more things. And because if you just held it, Roger Ver is a good example. If he just held it, he might be the richest person in the world today. But instead, he wants to change it to control it. He wants it to do more things. And that's just a totally natural place in a market that's emerging, because people don't understand protocols. They see technologies more often. And in human nature, we know if you could co-opt money, you would, because we have 5,000 years of human history that shows you would. So, but on this honest network, if you try to control it or cheat it, you get exposed eventually, and it gets stronger. So this is a really interesting. It incents the honest. It incentivizes the people who are building for everybody else. And as more and more people understand that, it gets stronger and stronger.
I think also a very good point on the incentives, and it's not only at individual level; it's also at a government level. One of the issue we had, so we moved from gold or any asset that free society chose as money. Firstly, free society will never choose something as money, something that it can be inflated without cost, without energy. So that's why also Bitcoin is much more in line to what we had as money for thousands of years versus its fiat money is the bug, is the problem. It was the deviation. And with this new system, one of the problems is the people think, okay, but sorry. With the new system, the government will not have the chance to print more money, so they will not simulate inflation and the economy. But this is exactly the problem. The problem is that the government has the chance to print more money to solve the problem. Instead of maybe they could cut deficit, cut spending, or increase taxation, and they always choose to print money, so to push the can on the street. Removing this opportunity will also not only push the individual to the right incentive, but also any government to be incentivized to have to be more fair towards the people. So we will have a better society.
Yeah, so government is supposed to be in service of us, right? Instead of preying on us. Now, if you could cheat people, just use the Monopoly game as an example. If everyone was going around the board and you had all the assets, the game gets kicked over or it ends. But what if you, instead of giving them $200 as they pass go, you gave them $400 and all the assets went up higher and they couldn't get around the board again. And then you gave them $600 and now the asset prices went higher again and they couldn't get around the board again. How long would those people play that game, realizing that the money is actually coming from being stolen from them and captured by the big and powerful? How long would they keep playing that game? Because that's the game the entire world is playing right now. And the question for every individual not spending most of their time in Bitcoin is, how long are you going to play that game? Because it's being stolen from you. Like completely, so under a guise of we need to do this. So the thing that's creating all of the problems in the world is the manipulation, the stealing of money. And why would government get stronger and bigger in that? Why would government have to take more control and remove individual rights and freedoms? They would have to, because it's a function of theft.
Yes, and history show that whenever we have the chance, they have the chance to print money to solve any issue, they will push that button. So it's also for us now, for people who spend a lot of time in Bitcoin, it's clear that the biggest problem that we are having in the world is a monetary problem, and Bitcoin will be the solution. As you said, there will be more and more people now interested, but it's not easy to, or say, orange peel or not orange peel, maybe make people interested, because I don't think that I can really orange peel a person. I can increase the curiosity of a person, but then the person has to do the work. One of my suggestions is always to go back to really study the history of money, because especially most of us lived only in this fiat standard, where it looks like the normality. And if you look around, even people with good degrees, good jobs, and so on, they know very little of the history of money. So I'm always saying, as a free society, we choose gold. First reason is because it was scarce, it was hard to produce. So it was really costing energy, same as Bitcoin. While now we have money that we have one person pushing a button and inflating as much as he wants. This is also something that you are saying when people asking, when explaining Bitcoin, or why the economical system is broken.
I think I try to meet people where they are instead of where I am, and see what is the thing they care most about, and then and what are the things they're really mad about, and then I ask them how they solve it through a system that must debase their currency, um, and I typically compare that with just the natural state of the free market is deflation. So, because when you know that, then you realize, then everything else, okay, well, it starts to rattle around in your brain, and you can't, there's no way to resolve that conflict. And as it rattles around in your brain, then you have to accept that your political systems, the way the economy, the way people talk about the economy is not the free market. It's a control system. And then you can ask from there, okay, so if you, does the person you're voting for, if it needs to steal more money, isn't it just who gets more of the stolen money, and then where does that come from? So, but I typically start where I see somebody kind of yelling at the world that they're living in. They're making that stronger by their actions. They don't know that, and then I start there. So what's the thing they care about most, and then I try to understand their perspective and give them a different perspective.
Thanks for the insight. I think it's a great point. Yeah, Francesco.
Also, if we ever talk about the role of government nowadays, the biggest problem is the disalignment between the incentive of the government in charge to go to get to the next mandate, therefore printing, and as opposite to the general interest of the citizens, which should be value and preservation of wealth. And this is something which is not easy to solve, but also to show to the population, because the propaganda is so strong. But I believe that the simple messages like what you just said, Bitcoin being a decentralized protocol, deflationary, so keeping it as a core value and showing it as a core value of Bitcoin, then tethered to energy, delivering simple messages can be very effective, because people doesn't have time to try to guess things. So physics related simple messages can be very effective in my opinion, not for everybody.
Yeah, and Francisco, I just want to highlight one quick thing, because a lot of people use my work and they say Bitcoin's deflationary. Bitcoin's just a neutral money. It's the protocol, and what it means is the free market is deflationary. So it's pricing the deflation in the market rather than it being deflationary. And I guess if you wanted to get technical, if people lost their coins, they could say Bitcoin's deflationary as well. But the most important part that I'm trying to get to is this is a neutral currency around the world, and which means anyone acting on top of this, all of the free market is moving, and it will price the free market forever, which is deflation, and it'll be exponential deflation. If you carry forward where we're going, if you move artificial intelligence into robotics, and that artificial intelligence and robotics are creating food for almost zero, and other things for almost zero, and energy priced in Bitcoin is almost zero. All of these things, if you imagine the abundance that could be delivered to the entire global population from this, it's almost unimaginable from what people are talking about today, because they're all of that is being captured by the existing fiat system. And then if I'm being what would you do as a politician if you were in politics and a whole bunch of people were starving, and from the system, there was no solve to that system, you have to realize what they're dealing with. Without more monetary easing, without continuing to do what they're doing, it would end, right? That existing system would collapse completely and utterly, be a catastrophe around the world. So I just don't get my arms up in what this looks like all around the world, because there is no resolve to the conflict short of war from the existing system. And that's typically how these things reset over time, because you can divide citizens against each other, and they believe that a person can save them, and they transfer all of their individual rights and freedoms to the person, who then creates a bigger enemy. So that's the way the world's always reset through this, and that's unfortunately where it feels like a bunch of this is going to today. And you can see probably from your friends, you can see from people on social media, you can see from how many people are leaning into that and giving that their energy to that, because they're scared, because they're yelling, because they're taking a side within that system. But because that system has to co-opt all your attention. And so the more you talk about that, the more you engage in it, the more energy you give and make it stronger, which is a requirement of that to be able to steal your power. Same is true for Bitcoin. Exact same is true for Bitcoin. The more energy that you give to it, the more energy that the more you're building on top of it. If you're running a node, if people aren't running a node on this, run a node. The more that you're self-custodial, the more you're buying it, whether you hold it, build on it, talk about it, all of that energy too is building this parallel path. And the faster that parallel path is built by all of us, the more people that understand this, the faster, the better, the higher chances that we can transition in an easier way. But this transition for people that are stuck in that other system and staying in that other system is going to be really difficult.
Yes, it will be at the moment. It looks like impossible that Bitcoin will, for many, that it will be the new monetary system. The more time passing, the more people will understand. Because Bitcoin. The great thing is they don't have CEO. Bitcoin has no CEO. They don't have it doesn't have a marketing team, but it has a lot of many people, many Bitcoiners. For example, now we are having this X Space, you with your book, we are all making also marketing for Bitcoin. So it will just increase over time. I would have also another question that I'm asked many times. First, I would like to know what is your take, and then I will say my opinion. Many they are saying, okay, but if it is a new monetary system, why the experts what is not coming from the economical world is not coming from the experts. I guess you're also having this question sometime.
I wrote about it in my book. It's called expert bias. You've seen so many things and so many times, and most of them don't work. So you ignore things that could. You don't do the work to be able to understand that they could. So I think that's the primary reason. Um, a lack of humility on what this is, believing you know more. There's a whole bunch of different reasons, but there's a bunch of economists that now have started to move here. So it's not all economists. I would just say, if you think about this, it's each individual person understanding. But then the other side of that argument is there's a lot of incentive to keep the existing system as is. There's a lot of, it's all built on misinformation. And in fact, if you thought about economists, everything that you need to understand about how an economy works through the lens that I'm talking about. In a free market, prices fall to the marginal cost of production. Number one. Number two, we trade with each other all over the world. I think that's actually all that economics is. It's those two things. We try to gain more value by trading with people all over the world, and prices fall to the marginal cost of production, which kind of reinforces what I said about how easy this is to understand if you just understand those two things. And so from what I just said, try to disprove what I just said, and take the opposite side and steelman the opposite side. And I can't. I can't find kind of flaws in what I just said, and it makes economics super simple, which means all of economics and all of the cost to society of economics and all of the teaching and all is really about a control system to gain more power, and all of the people within it are part of extra cost to all of us inside that inside that system. So I find it interesting from that, because I don't know what you would say as an economist to what I just said too. So think about the textbooks, everything that's written. I talked to many economists that that kind of see the light in what I'm saying, and remember their PhD thesis and PhDs, and they say something like, we were never allowed to look deeper on what is money in the first place. You weren't allowed to look there. You had to build on top of inflation, and this is how the math works, and this is how everything works. You just didn't go deep enough.
It was like, okay, it's granted that money should come from the government, that we will need inflation, and then all the economists should build from that. And actually, as you said, first is the bias. If you are an expert, it's hard. If you build 15, 20 years of your career on this economical system, to question the same economical system, it's much harder than for someone who's coming from abroad, from another field, for example. And secondly, as you were saying, the incentives, this is also very important. Like if someone is believing in really believe in the Austrian schools, and sound money is not incentivized by the system, because you don't work for most of the economists work for the government, or if they teach to university, they got praise or recognition if they sponsor the standard, the actual system. So I think thanks for explaining this. I think this is a great point, because this is a question coming from many new joiners, and it's good that the people here in the space, they heard your point.
Yeah, Alex, just on that, I think it's funny you said, and because why I try to simplify that to that standard is most people don't think they can look at economics because they think it's too hard. It's made to look difficult, and they think they're not smart enough to look at it, and then they don't ask us really simple questions to understand that how this should look, and they get trapped because and it's a feeling of there must be smarter people than me that have figured this out, so which is untrue.
Yeah, go ahead.
Francesco, please go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned before the concept of scaling. So after the block size war, then also before, the scaling worked out pretty well, is the way forward. But we recently had an interview with Vijay. He said he was bullish on financial layers on top of Bitcoin. Do you think we should not we should allow, because everybody can do whatever he wants, but is that, in our opinion, the right way to go? Do people need, and do this monetary asset needs, does it need more financial layers, more services? Is the right way forward, or maybe other people could on this land which resembles the TCP/IP, wants to do other use cases, and I think that's not correct. But is the financial layers on top of Bitcoin going to be a thing and needed in the future?
Yeah, so I think about it as a new peer-to-peer internet being built on top of this, and financial layers are on top of that. So Lightning, Liquid, are layer twos that that every 10 minutes come back down to layer one, and that gives scalability on this on the second layer. I'm not going to go deep on this subject right now, but if you were a nation state actor, and you needed your currency to continue, in let's say into a stable coin or such, you can imagine you would do everything to win that second layer as possible, because then you could suppress Bitcoin price through layer two. So, and it would look a lot like gold in that event. If everybody used a stable coin versus Lightning, or things inherently built without a token on top of Bitcoin, you could imagine how much power you could gain to continue the system. So, and how much money you would have to be able to create misinformation on what's happening. I will just leave it there, because instead of going into everything else on this, but because what I see about Lightning right now, and the scaling on Lightning, and what's going to happen on Fediment, which we invested in scaling solutions there 2.5 years ago. What I see is the misinformation today around it scaling is large. I think is largely caused by people not understanding how things scale in layers on top of Bitcoin.
Yeah, so do you see the current debate around the Lightning to be baseless and things are working well, which I believe?
Completely baseless. So I want to be careful about completely baseless in one way. So if you were a bunch of Lightning developers on top of Bitcoin and you didn't understand scaling and layers, then you would build layer two like it needed to be decentralized and secure. That'd be a totally natural thing to do. If you were hardcore Bitcoin maxi, understood the how this, and if you did that, then it would be then some of those builds would look like every single person needed liquidity in every single channel, and some of those, and as a result of that, then if you considered it like a road network, it would look like backlane one-way gravel roads, and people would get trapped in those backlane one-way gravel roads without enough liquidity to back out of it, and prices would go up. And that would be, and then from that position, if you were trying to create a company there and you did that, you would say Lightning can't scale. So that part of this is true, but it's because of the way people implemented it. Why we invested in Breeze over 2 years ago is to implement a different solution, an SDK with a LSP that could scale way more. Even with that, we knew that Lightning couldn't scale to 8 billion people using it all the time. So we invested in Fedi so that it could. And so when you look at Breeze, other solutions other than Breeze too, but you look at Breeze and Fedi and what's happening and how early we are in this process, you have a scaling system that can go to 8 billion people. There's trade-offs in each of those, but they all come back down to the base layer. And so when people are talking about the scaling challenge today, I'm going, I'm surprised people are surprised, because you could see this a long time ago, and the work has been building for a long time to make sure that it can, and it will. So we'll see, but I think largely people are confused in this. I use Lightning every day. I use Lightning for a lot of purchases every day. It is scaling. It's scaling as fast as the internet is scaling, and it's getting more efficient in scaling. Can it scale to 8 billion people? No. But those technologies are building on top of this with the interoperability to Lightning are already in almost full form.
Thank you. Also, good hint you gave about the risk of control on these layers should be built with extremely care and adversarial thinking, I believe.
And do you want to pull up Joe just for a second? Like I respect a bunch of things Joe said, but I just saw a thumbs down on the scaling, so I'd love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, Joe.
Yes, we are
just
invited him. Yep.
Maybe he's not there. Okay. Go ahead, Alessandro, because I don't have any other questions.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Francesco. Meanwhile, if we're waiting in case Joe replies, I firstly also want to say your speech in Atlantis was one of the best, also for the motion that you show. It really see that you really believe in the mission that you're pursuing. And you in that speech you said 3 years ago you moved. 3 or 4 years ago, you were working in the fiat world and then spending some time in the Bitcoin world. Then you transition, and once you transition, then everything scaled. So I would like to know some suggestion you have maybe to other people who will be interested in also in doing at one point this kind of this transition to spend more energy and more time for the biggest innovation or protocol of the century.
Yeah, I would just, and everybody in their own time, but if you're already to the point that you know that the existing system extracts energy from you and time and energy, and you're living in that because it's really hard because you can't make enough money because you're stuck there. Think about all of the other people that are in lower positions that you and are stuck into a system based on essentially theft and how bad it gets. And it gets worse and worse and worse as it's extracted more. And you tell yourselves a lie, and I did the same thing. Right, I'll do it later. I'll do it at a certain time, and without realizing the actual cost on yourself, because you can't see the opportunity if you're living your entire time in that system that's stealing from you. But it's really easy to get trapped. And so with that, if you know what the system is and you know where it's building, that's where all the opportunity is, because you're building with people that are kind of building a more hopeful world that is exactly against that system. So it makes sense to move your time. How much time you can move? You can start small. You can start what you're doing right now. You can start a Spaces. You could start a podcast. You could run a node. You could buy and hold Bitcoin. You could buy every day in Bitcoin. You can talk to your friends. But out of doing that, you could run a meetup, and out of running a meetup, you could run something at your local school, and out of running those, you'll start to meet other people. Then you'll start to see opportunities to solve problems in this network that create other opportunities, and those opportunities will expand. And the more time you spend here, you see these incredible opportunities. And so I can just tell you myself, by moving my time here, the type of people that I work with every day and the opportunities that I see every day to solve problems in a way that I don't think most people really realize or even solved or about to be solved and coming. It just inspires you more every day. Like, I can't believe what I get to do. And so my encouragement, and 3 years ago, I wasn't here. It was a choice to move here. And I wish people could see what I see every day, so that they would also move more of their time here.
I think Jeff is inspiring for people who would like to move at one point on more on Bitcoin. I see also Joe now on stage. Maybe Jeff, you can ask Joe.
Yeah, Joe, I just saw a thumbs down, and I just love your thoughts on kind of layer twos.
Yeah, I thanks for having me up first off, and I'll always appreciate hearing from you, Jeff, and agree with the vast majority of everything you said since I've been in the room. So thank you for sharing that. I will just say, to the extent I understood your comments to imply, and maybe I misinterpreted them, that the custodial use of Bitcoin and financial institutions using Bitcoin as reserve, and folks relying on custodians for interactions with Bitcoin and scaling to the extent, where you have reserves deposited in the form of Bitcoin into financial institutions, and then using those layer twos, more traditional finance layer twos. I think, number one, they're inevitable. And number two, I think they are the path forward that will scale very quickly to 8 billion people, where I can deposit my Bitcoin into financial institutions and then have access to it through the traditional payment rails. I think it's the least frictionless, it's the most frictionless way of scaling very quickly. And while I see virtue and value in all of these layer two solutions, it seems to me that in the near term, if you're really talking about rapid adoption, I think those solutions that are already going to be integrated into the financial system are the fastest way. And I guess the one thing I took issue with is the notion that custodial solutions for Bitcoin, which I think will grow rapidly over the next 10 years, I think that those will not undermine necessarily the price appreciation. So, I mean, I thought it caught something about the notion of gold, and the idea that if this is the problem with gold, that folks could play games on top of it and drive narratives, and that would be similar with stablecoins. Well, I don't think you need to introduce the element of some stable value token or theoretically pegged token into the mix, where you could have Bitcoin at the heart of the financial system. And banks as economic actors, my view is that they're going to start to diversify slowly and steadily away from government securities. I think that problems with government securities will become increasingly evident for the foreseeable future. And as that happens, I expect them to diversify into Bitcoin. So I think it will both serve as a reserve asset for the banking institutions, and also it will become a preferred custody place for individuals who want to have access to payment solutions and want to deposit that into banking accounts. So I don't view that as inherently bad. I think that's a logical next step, and I hope long run that we get to the solutions you're talking about. But I'd anticipate they're further away than people expect.
Yeah, actually, the funny, I don't disagree with what. In fact, that's where I see the long term risk. I just see if you took this asset in the long term and you created a layer two that couldn't be seen and brought down to layer one from this, then you'd abstract the value in the long term. But I don't think it's going to.
Can you help me understand that, Jeff? That's what I want to understand. Why would you think it would bring it down?
Could you fractionalize, if you could do this, could you fractionalize on top of Bitcoin?
They already did. It's FTX, right? It's already occurred.
But that's what I mean. It will happen over and over and over again. And for people not trusting into that system, they're protected against that from that fractionalization. So what you just described will happen. People might make choices, but Lightning and what will happen on Fediment are the opposite side of that choice. So, what I'm getting at is through that, a bunch of people are going to get hurt in time.
Yeah, and we've seen that through the whole story of Bitcoin, right?
Totally.
The easiest way to advocate someone for self-custody, I mean, you got to remember some of the diehards now, that those of us who have been for a very long time, the reason we're so passionate about self-custody is because we've been burned, right? There's no better way to convert you to the virtues of self-custody than losing money in Voyager or BlockFi or FTX or any one of these things.
And the same thing will likely happen on a bunch of these other things. So anyways, we're in agreement. It'll scale faster there because it'll seem easier, and there's a risk in scaling there.
Yeah, but I guess I don't see it, and maybe I'm misinterpreting you. I don't see it as a long run risk. I think it is our favorite word, transitory risk, right? That will eventually be mitigated in time, where people pre-market solutions move towards self custody because of the problems with trust, right? So it doesn't do anything to damage the long run expectations. I think it's more of just a period of conversion where we have to have this legacy system, which will try to cling to Bitcoin as a
So
lifeboat,
yeah,
just
Joe.
like individuals.
Yeah, Joe. I guess maybe from this, I've seen today. I've seen 26 deep dive layer 2 solutions and VC money and tokenization. This looks like altcoin in 2017, a massive hype cycle, and all of this stuff has very little utility value. But I understand a whole bunch of people are going to get hurt on it. That's really and if I was trying to get my layer 2 to be able to matter and how much money I could put into that layer 2, some of that. That's what's we're early in this cycle right now, and all of that noise that you're hearing is creating this lightning can't scale, so my thing can. That's what I'm describing, and lightning is scaling.
Yeah, and the interesting thing that I appreciate your take on is, in terms of the immediate path forward, and I'm not talking about long run solutions, but I expect within 5 years I'll be able to deposit Bitcoin into my Fidelity account. I expect that I'll be able to deposit into other major banking institutions. And to the extent I need to use already existing, very fast, cheap, efficient payment rails, credit cards, right, debit cards, these things, I think they'll be fully integrated with Bitcoin. Now, yes, I'm giving up some of my custody to put that in the hands of a third party who will process those things. But I'm not going to put the 95% of my stack that will be in cold storage, right? I'm going to use the existing payment layers, the traditional finance market, to scale very rapidly. And I would much rather store all my value on a consistent basis through paychecks, through any investments I make in Bitcoin.
Yeah, then in every different country is going to see that. We're seeing a lot of circular economy stuff in some of the developing nations. That's just all on Bitcoin. There is no other rail. So every choice and you're talking from the U.S. perspective in something that has these rails, and in those rails, I think the risk of that is it's developing really fast as a trading mechanism around the world, which doesn't need that. It's native to the protocol. But each different person in each different country will choose that based on what the best value for them is.
So, do you think in the Western world, let's say the more developed nations, let's use that term, in more developed nations, do you suspect that my theory as to the integration into TradFi will come to pass in the near term, or do you think that they will always resist it, at least until this layer 2 solutions are more competitive than Visa and MasterCard?
I think the most likely is that they'll try to, in the existing solutions, their revenue model breaks on this. So how do you replace the revenue that is native in this platform, is native in the technology on something that literally goes to zero or almost zero? It would take a big most giant corporations, most monopolies, don't do the thing at the edge that creates the next opportunity. They fight they fight it till the end. So through that lens, I would expect a whole bunch of negotiating with how do I get my margins in this, which might be these other solutions, these kludgy solutions, which will just potentially extend their life, but it won't it won't change them. I guess most monopolies fail from not seeing innovation like this, which is so powerful, that moves from the bottom up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's interesting because we have seen plenty of examples in recent memory where monopolies have been broken or cannibalized through folks that are, you know, doing away with the traditional fee structure. You know, for example, I think like brokerages, their fee structure was completely destroyed by the likes of Robinhood, and then every brokerage house had to drop fees, and then they, you know, just mine your data. I would not be surprised if similar concepts came to Bitcoin and banking solutions, where there's increasingly mined data with your banking partners, which is another real risk.
So that's what I mean, and then that creates a different risk. And by the way, I'm talking to institutions like you're talking about right now, and watching them at the executive level. I have a board presentation at a major bank coming up, watching them trying to negotiate with this protocol, and they don't know that they're not negotiating with this protocol. And so that provides so now how do I monetize this in a different way? And exactly like you said, okay, I monetize the data, which then people are, wait, why am I doing this? And so this change, again, protocols like this impose a totally different way of working across monopolies. We saw it in the internet. We're really early in this right now, and it's going to be messy.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thanks for the thoughts. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for the question, and Jeff for replying. Really great and insightful on layer 2. One last question for me, Jeff. When we have people in Bitcoiners in Europe, when we'll have the chance to see you in another conference in Europe? Is it planned yet?
I'm going to Oslo Freedom Forum in June. That's my next one in Europe.
Okay, thanks for the information. Francesco, you have other question for Jeff?
No, basically, I already asked. Thank you.
I think we are almost approaching almost 1.5 hours. It will be time to wrap up. So I'm saying thanks again, Jeff, to join for the third episode of this X podcast, Bitcoiners are of value. If you have some last words for this space for those who are listening.
No, just thanks for doing this, and thanks for everyone for joining. Always a pleasure.
Francesco?
We are going to host many other events with other notable speakers. If you want to follow the host, the co-host, and the Store of Bitcoin profile beside us, you will get notified. We stress the conversation, or we focus on the store of value feature of Bitcoin, because we believe that's the most immediate way to lure people into Bitcoin, by showing what they can see at the moment. This is our approach, but we also want to expand it to broaden to the full feature Bitcoin as the currency as it is. Thank you. It was Jeff. It was a great night. Thank you all.
Thanks, Francesco. I can just double down. It's the third episode, and I'm enjoying each of them. Really great conversation, also very educational on what Bitcoin is and which will be the outlook for next years. As said, if you like this space, we have created a profile Store of Bitcoin, and we'll also advertise the future spaces. We have Jesse Myers next Tuesday, and then is planned also Lawrence Leopard the 2nd of May, and James Lavish the 28th of May. Plus, we will have other interviews in the next weeks that we have to schedule. I also commented with a YouTube link. Also, we have a YouTube channel for if you are not listening this in stream and in live, and you want to listen in YouTube, you can also listen to the previous episode and future episode in YouTube. So if interested, please subscribe to the channel. Then thanks all. Thanks also Joe to have come on stage. I was for the bringing more insights on the great discussion, and see you in one of the next episode. Bye. Have a nice evening.